This is a Fox News alert. Turkey joining the fight against ISIS. Formally now, their parliament approving a motion moments ago that will allow the government to send combat troops to battle Islamic extremists in neighboring Iraq and Syria, and will allow coalition forces on Turkish air bases. Greg Palcott is live in Turkey near the Syrian border with more. Hello, Greg.
Hey, Shannon, the developments in the last 20 minutes or so could be a potential game changer for this increasingly difficult war the U.S. has taken on with ISIS terrorists. The Turkish parliament voting by an overwhelming margin, 298-98, in favor of authorizing its military to help the U.S. and its allies in this offensive, including, for example, letting the U.S. use bases inside Turkey, nearby Syria, for some of its airstrikes, as well as allowing Turkish military boots to go on the ground. It has been discussed both for Syria and Iraq. The Turkish military, strong and well-trained. As we found out today, this vote tonight is an urgent matter. Take a look. You are looking at the front line of the war on ISIS. Just a mile behind me inside Syria is the town of Kobani, Kurdish held. And we are told in the villages surrounding that town, maybe just a couple of miles from where we are, villages held by the terrorists. In the past couple of hours since we've been here, we've heard some explosions. We are told it's ISIS militants shooting into the town. We're also told in the last couple of days there have been U.S. airstrikes in the region. Right nearby, the Turkish military. They're not thinking of invading. They're just trying to keep a lid on things. Well, they might start thinking of invading now that they have authorization, and it will be a very urgent matter, as I said. The latest word we are getting from our contacts on the ground is that ISIS is closing in on that town, and that could be a trigger for Turkish involvement. Watching very closely, of course, the 160,000 refugees who have fled this region in the past week. Also authorized in this bill the creation of a safe zone, a buffer zone for those refugees. But, Shannon, one note coming from the defense minister tonight: this will not necessarily happen tomorrow or in the next few days. Turkey has to look long and hard about what could be a very difficult engagement. Back to you.
Absolutely. All right, Greg, thank you.
Well, can the decision by Turkey now help save those 400,000 desperate people in Kobani and stop a potential massacre there by the radical Islamic militants? Well, as ISIS is closing in, as Greg just reported, it seems the coalition airstrikes to try and help Kobani so far have not been enough. Captain Chuck Nash now joins us with the very latest. Captain Nash, you know, Turkey now can only deploy the troops in Syria and Iraq, but they'll let the foreign forces, us, use the bases like Imperiled, which they have not sometimes let us use before. Why is this parliament decision so significant?
Well, first off, as you point out, we get to use the base at Incirlik. I've spent a fair amount of time there. It is an exceptionally good facility. We've operated out of there with the Turks and independently for some time, especially during the Gulf Wars. So having that base for logistics, having the port facilities, being able to use that, Turkey shares an 800-mile border with Syria. So it would be very important to have that access straight down from the north. We're flying aircraft carrier sorties from the Arabian Gulf up through Iraq and bombing in Iraq. So this would allow NATO and coalition forces to operate directly across the border, which gives you more time on station because you're that much closer to your objectives.
And what do you think to help change their mind? I mean, Erdogan, for example, has been resisting this. They are continuing to let the black market oil fund ISIS. They've let those foreign fighters flood over the border. And the Turkish tanks captain have been sitting on the border by the fence, not moving to help the Kurds of Kobani.
Up until this point, that's exactly right. It's been a blocking action, but it hasn't been working because, as Greg Palcott pointed out, there are in the hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing from Syria into Turkey. That's causing problems in Turkey, and I think that's one of the reasons why the parliament decided to move forward, which is this situation is not getting any better. In fact, it appears to be getting worse. So they had to step in and do that. If they do send in ground forces, that's going to be a game changer. In fact, the whole calculus will then change.
Yeah, what message does that send? You mean a game changer?
Well, now all of a sudden you have two regional countries, Syria and Turkey, and one has an invasion force in the other country. So, yes, they're in there. We are in there with the coalition bombing ISIS. But up until this point, we have not taken any direct action against the Syrians. The Turks and the Syrians are not good buddies. So if Turkey were to send ground forces in, the Syrians, the Assad regime, would have to really weigh what this looks like. Is this just to take care of ISIS? Because the Turks want to have a buffer zone inside of Syria. So is that what they're doing? Or is this more of a permanent relationship? So the Assad regime would have to react to a Syrian incursion or to a Turkish incursion.
You know, the ISIS crimes, the beheadings, the massacres, the rapes, are just so heartbreaking. And there was a kind of compelling glimpse in the New York Times. They interviewed a resident of Kobani who fled, and this is what he said. His name is Omar Hameo. He's 45 years old. I worked as a laborer for 30 years before I was able to pay $15,000 for my Mitsubishi. Delivering goods was my way to feed my family on a daily basis. I think that the coalition airstrikes might be able to push ISIS away, but I don't think they will be able to give me back my car or the life I had. Omar's claim makes it so very real. Can the airstrikes help Omar and help the other desperate people of Kobani who are fleeing?
The airstrikes can reduce the overwhelming capability that ISIS has displayed to this point, but it cannot eliminate it, and it cannot degrade it enough to where it's no longer a threat. You need a ground force to go against a ground force. So the Turks may be that ground force. We've been hoping that we can use the Free Syrian Army. But in fact, what it appears is going on is as we bomb ISIS, Assad now shifts his force away because he doesn't have to fight them as much, and he's shifting his forces against the Free Syrian Army, who are the people who we are trying to ally with.
It's complicated, and it continues. Captain Chuck Nash.
It does.
Always good to see you. Thank you so much.